everyone, welcome back to the Half Soybean channel. My name is Sharon and today we are going to be making my dream top, my dream cloud top. The first time I came across this top was about 6 months ago. I was walking in Westfield, which is an Australian shopping centre complex, and it was in the display case and I absolutely fell in love with the puffy sleeves, like the layered puffy sleeves. It looked like a cloud and I was like, that is so beautiful. Maybe I should get this top, but it was a whopping $275 and I wasn't totally sold with the V neckline and also like the belt situation going on in the waistline. At the time when I was like peering into the glass case and trying to see if I could recreate this myself, I decided that it was way too difficult for me and I just kind of forgot about it. Like, it's been months, but something was ignited within me and I was like, why can't I just try it out? There's no harm in just trying to recreate this. So I've got this very preliminary sketch. It's very rough. I think the top sleeve should look like this, quite wide on the bottom and curved as well. And then the second half of the sleeve, which is like that little tier, I think it should look like a half circle skirt, but I'm not sure exactly how it's going to turn out, but this is kind of the shape that I know that I have to make for this outcome. And then we've got the waistband, pretty self-explanatory. I want the top to tie with an open back and it's got a button at the top and I'll probably do a bow at the bottom. And then the front bodice piece should be quite wide because I also want to gather it. I want it to have a gathered neckline. So this section should be like about, I don't know, twice your normal neckline, I suppose. And then we've just got the back pieces right there. Today I will be employing the help of two paper patterns that have featured on my channel or will be featuring on my channel quite regularly, and I'm going to be using this M7969 for the shoulder kind of area, and also like I'm going to kind of pattern hack the bodice section as well with this. And then this pattern I'm simply using for the top half of the puffy sleeves. I'm going to try and utilize that. But other than that, I have no freaking idea what I am doing. I picked up this really beautiful satiny kind of material and it's kind of crinkled. It's got a crinkled kind of texture, but not really. It's just it's a very subtle texture and I thought it was very, very pretty. I also kind of got this pleated fabric just a tiny bit because I thought maybe I could make a bow at the back just to tie the top together. For the most part, I literally do not understand any of the instructions in this vintage pattern, so I'm really just using the shapes that they give me and making up my own instructions as I go, because honestly, what the hell? So the first thing I'm trying to do is combine the shapes of the sleeve patterns of that vintage and McCall's pattern. The brown one, which is the wider one, is the vintage pattern. The McCall's pattern has kind of a raglan shoulder feature, which is why I had to keep the top half the same. However, I knew I was copying the width and the bottom curve of that vintage pattern. I went over it with a marker, so hopefully you can see the shape a little bit better, and I'm cutting that out. I will also give you the measurements in a second so you can replicate in a similar shape if you want to. The top edge is 25 inches, the bottom width is about 42 inches, and please note that this is a horizontal length and not the length of the curve. The sleeve length is about 5.5 inches. Earlier I said for the front piece I was going to pattern hack the McCall's one, so the pattern is laying on the fold currently. What I am doing is adding 10 centimeters in length of the bodice, then I just extended the neckline so it is a subtle curve rather than a wrap style of the original shape. There you can see what I want to do eventually, which is gathering the neckline and bottom width. Next, I decided to cut the second half of the sleeve, which is that tiered part, and I'm creating two half circle skirts, one for each arm. The radius I used for the inner circle to be cut out is 6 inches, then I marked that along the circle to indicate where I needed to cut it out. Then from that radius, I put another 8 inches to be the length of the actual half circle skirt. Then I marked along those 8 inches so I knew where to cut as well. I've returned to the bodice and this is the back piece. Like I did for the front piece, I am adding 10 centimeters in length to the back piece in the McCall's pattern. However, this time I'm not cutting on the fold since it will be an open back anyway. Now I'm cutting out my waistband. The width is just your waist circumference with some seam allowance. And I originally thought my waistband would be quite thick, so I think I made the width about 20 something centimeters. But later I ended up halving it, as you will see. Then it was time to cut the lining part, which was pretty intimidating. I think in retrospect, I can say that I should have made the lining a little bit roomier for better comfort, but luckily the top still fits me. I think I'm just more used to wearing looser clothing since quarantine. Just wanted to check in and talk to you about my feelings, which is that I'm feeling really stressed because I'm honestly just like making stuff up as I go, and I'm just like, I don't even know if it's gonna work, and I'm just making stuff up. I mean, like, this is what my inner lining for the top sleeve looks like, and no, this does not look right. I don't know what else it could be. This is such a difficult task. By the way, I did make this jacket last year, and I have a tutorial for it if you're interested. It's a reversible teddy jacket, and I kind of really like this gingham side. Since the lining does not require any gathering, I just measured them out as it would be a fitted top. So for example, for the outer part, if I had doubled my neckline for the gatherings, the lining would just be half that length, which is what would fit my neck normally. There was not really an exact science to the lining, I just did what I felt would work on my body, but the bottom line is that it should be smaller than the outer fabric, since all of that will be gathered to fit the size of the lining pieces. You can see that the second tier of the sleeve I'm cutting here is much smaller than the outer one. So I just finished cutting all the fabric, and it just takes a lot out of me mentally. It's very bright in my room right now. It's a 2 o'clock sun just shining through, but I've got to put in gathering stitches along a lot of the edges that do need gathering for this top, and that's like pretty much every edge. So let me just take you through that now. The first part that requires gathering is this sleeve. This is the top sleeve pattern, and we want to put in a gathering stitch along the top here and also the bottom curve. We also want to do the same for the half circle skirt situation for the bottom half of the sleeve along the top and also along the bottom. And very similar for the front bodice along the top and the bottom. This looks deceptively similar to the sleeve pattern, but this is actually going to be the top. Finally, we've got the back pieces. So top gathers and then bottom gathers. Together, the settings on your machine should be the longest stitch and the highest tension, and it should gather a lot of the fabric automatically, as you can see here. So this outer part is gathered, and I've also got the lining piece under here, so I've just placed them right sides together, and I just want to sew a straight line across here attaching this part and this part. I don't exactly know why I'm doing this, I just feel like it's the first step, but we'll just see how it goes. So I'm just attaching the top edge of the sleeve right sides together, but not the bottom edge. Then it should look something like this from the right side. I also understitched that part since there is a high chance of flipping, as the outer fabric is going to be so much more heavier than the lining. And then I realized the outer fabric, whilst very pretty, was just way too thin and flimsy for the kind of structure I hope to see. So I retrospectively added in some interfacing after I had already gathered it. I didn't want to undo the gathers and redo them again. I chose to do it this way, but it did make my job kind of harder to put the interfacing in. This is the front panel of the bodice now, and I'm just going to do the same thing where I just sew a straight line across the top neckline and also understitch the lining down. The bodice follows kind of exactly the same steps as I did with the sleeve. Right, so this is the front panel, and I've just opened it up. This is the right side and this is the lining. And then I'm just going to grab one of the sleeves, just pin that so it's right sides together. I'm gonna line it up along here and along here. So I've just pinned it like that along the armpit, and I'm going to sew that down on and then repeat that for the other side. This is how I chose to connect the shoulder parts, and I think it worked pretty well. It was kind of tricky to match up the corners exactly, but if you go slowly, it should be fine. Now I'm doing the tiered sleeve part, just working on it in advance so it's ready to go later. Gather the other edge of the circle skirt to match the lining length and sew that down right sides together. Then open it up like this and match the side edges of the circle skirt with the lining parts and the outer part right sides together and sew along that edge. Then when you flip it out to the right side, it should look something like this. It's like a tiny bubble skirt. I pinned the open top edge and I'm just basting that down and setting it aside for the time being. Next, I did the back pieces and gathered to match the lining pieces. Then I followed exactly the same steps and attached it to the rest of the top. This is what it looks like on the inside. We're going to attach the second tier of the sleeve, so before that it looks like this. It's open and nothing is connected down the side of the top, so there are two things I did. Firstly, I basted the bottom of the sleeve and lining first, then I went to attach the armpit and side seams together. This is what it should look like once you have completed those steps. Okay, so there's that second tier we prepared before, and I'm just arranging it onto the bottom edge of the first sleeve and pinning around that circumference and sewing that down. I'm 100% sure that there is a way to attach the pieces together so you don't have to overlock, but in the interest of time and being just a little bit lazy, I did it this way. I also had a change in design, so rather than using a button to close up the top of the top, I changed them to ties. I'm adding them to the neck area, so the top and also the middle of the back, which I did off camera, but you will be able to see that in the final look, which is pretty self-explanatory. Now it's time for the waistband, so I basted the bottom of the outer and lining parts down first. Then I am adding some interfacing to the waistband. As I said earlier, I ended up making a thick waistband first, but I redid it to be thinner later. But I only filmed attaching the thick waistband and didn't refilm for the thinner one, but the steps are exactly the same. It's kind of like making an extra thick or large bias binding, so I ironed the band to become a two-fold bias binding. As you can see, the fold lines there. This is how I want the band to go on, so I attached it onto the bottom of the top as I would a regular bias binding. I just did that on the one side first, as I still had to attach the bottom ties. I decided to still use that pleated fabric for the very bottom ties, so I'm just making them here. Then I just tuck it into the waistband so I can sew down the sides first. When you flip it the right way, it should look nice and neat. Finally, I'm sewing down the waistband from the right side, and we are all done. And here is the final look. So the cloud top is not as stiff as I had envisioned in my head, but I still love it so much. I think I would really like to attempt it again, potentially with a different kind of fabric like organza, so it's kind of more stiff and puffy, but I still think it turned out very, very well. As I mentioned, I have 3 ties on the back, as I felt like it was a little bit too open with just the top and bottom ones. Also, I paired the top with these really flowy wide leg pants, and there will be a tutorial for these pants next, so please stay tuned for that. They're really so comfortable, and it's a really great pair that you can make in less than a day. I also ended up wearing this outfit for my graduation, and I'll include a few pictures at the end. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in part 2 of this outfit, which is the matching cloud pants.